Make my own rules, play my own games. I don't give a
Hi, I'm Ray.
And I'm Steph,
And this is the SciComm Hotline.
where we gossip about all the cringe and exciting ways science is communicated in real life.
So let's bring the drama.
wild and free.
Because we were doing the countdown.
Hi, Ray.
Hi, Steph. How are you?
I'm doing all right. How are you? How are our listeners doing? How are our 5 friends who are listening doing?
Can I say, should I share what I told you about our listeners yesterday?
Yeah, please share.
That we were like worried about like posting something today. And they were like, "Oh, what if we don't make it like on Friday?" I'm like, we're like, it's not like anyone is like waiting to be like, "Oh, it's Friday. We can't like we need to listen to it." And we do have friends that are very enthusiastic, which I was like, I love our friends because they're liars. No,
Yeah, exactly. They're like, "Oh my god, I'm for sure listening. Gonna support." Like, nope.
right. I'm like, and they were like, no, we are enthusiastic and we are excited. And I'm like, no one can be that excited about this, but these are good friends. These are the friends you want to keep for the rest of your life. You want friends that lie to you about their enthusiasm for the shitty content you have just started to make. So, to the friends that even if you're faking enthusiasm and telling us that you're waiting for our podcast to drop, but we know you're probably not, we love you. We're our best friends.
We appreciate the solidarity. Yeah, we're I guess what are we hating on this week? I know one of the topics
Mhm.
offline is, fear. Fear has been a topic for a lot, but I don't know, this week has been good. I've been in my manifesting era, and yeah, to try to not doom scroll, I've been trying to like write, journaling of like what I'm grateful for, what I'm manifesting. And that does help, change the mood a little bit. Um, but there's still fear and anxiety that's always looming around. But yeah, how are you this week?
Um, yeah, probably same. Fear has been definitely a bigger theme this week and last week. Obviously because of the things going on in Iran, but also like in America, um, and jobs and how few jobs there are. And I know it's kind of interesting. I feel like we start each podcast with the same thing where we're like, give us jobs.
I know we're still hating on that. We're still living in it. We're in the middle of it. There's not else like we can think of. We're both like in this weird like
Rumination.
transition period.
Yeah.
Um in a weird period of like uncertainty, and we're just like in the middle of it, in the thick of it. So I guess like maybe in terms of, since we're not really hating on anything, is any positive hates? Any positive hates you encountered this week?
Oh. Yeah, I mean, I've been seeing content, I think, that I've positively hated where I was like,
Mm.
"Oh, I wish I would have made that content." Or yeah, it's like a pleasant kind of like, "You know what? I respect you and I hate you for how good you are." That kind of thing. And there's this girl, Abby something. I can link her. And she talks a lot about like the language of propaganda, misinformation, uses a lot of like examples and stuff. And I was like, and she's just so fluent on the camera too. And I was like, oh, I wish like I could just like turn on my phone, the recorder, and just like record myself talking so easily about something kind of like this complicated. And again, I don't know what's going on behind the scene. I don't know if she has a script. I don't know if she like has re-recorded that like a billion times, and what I'm seeing is like the perfect version. But what I'm seeing, I'm like, she's talking about communications really well, and I want to do that. I want to talk more about communication on my Instagram,
Yeah.
film myself. And
Yeah.
you've been doing some of that.
No, but I also like hate on that too. There's this one content creator, I don't remember. I think they're a postdoc, and she does the thing where she's like, this piece of news is being talked about right now, but she's like in front of like a fume hood, and she's like doing some cell work. So she'll like spray her hands after she like says what her hook is, and then turns around and she's multitasking. So she's like doing whatever her cell stuff is, and then she's talking about the topic. But it also seems like Oh man, like yeah, it makes me jealous for people that make content look so effortlessly, but I'm also like, this bitch is like alone in her lab. Like how is she I'm like how many takes did it actually take?
Right.
Did she write this pre ahead of time?
It's
Yeah,
work.
because I'm in this we're yeah, so like Ray and I are in like this weird transition of our jobs. I'm technically living the unemployed life in terms of I have like small gigs here and there. They're like some hourly gigs. It's not really like anything major. And so I have like a lot of downtime. And I tend to just kind of like complain but not do anything about it. And so it's like, okay, like let me do something with my time again. And I miss the time where we were super creative, but that was also under the umbrella and comfort of academia. All being online really helped open a lot of doors while I was in academia to be where I am. And so it's like, ugh, it has to, unfortunately, not has to, but it feels like I need to make myself like online again to just like put myself out there, share what I'm looking for, and then that just kind of helps like opens the door. So I had this idea that I was sharing with Ray of like, okay, what if I document my time of like, follow me as I try to land a new job. But I think it comes down to just like, Ray and I have done like a lot of cool shit and we're connected with a lot of cool people, but then we're always like our number one haters and just being like so insecure. But then when they people reach out to us, they're like, "No, you guys are like really good at what you do." But I'm like, "But why doesn't that reflect the work that we do?" Or get paid for the stuff that we do. But anyways, I've been trying to get in front of the camera, but I just instantly compare myself to like all of our cool casual like science communication friends that just like do it so effortlessly, even though it takes a lot of effort to be effortless. But I don't know. I feel like have you ever thought that I feel like what people that make so much money on TikTok that are just doing it based off, like, personality and being super funny or, like, being super attractive. And so it just feels like I'm like, I'm kinda funny, but not like a comedian. I'm pretty, but not like, Instagram hottie, baddie, or anything like that. And I definitely am too much of a perfectionist to, like, put really bad content out there. So I'm like, what like, I just feel like, "What the fuck am I doing?"
I have, like when you send audio messages and you're listening to them and there's like six of them and you're like, oh, I'm going to respond to this one and then this one and then this one. At the end of it, you're like, what was I going to
I'm
say?
so sorry. I just went on, like I had, like, 5 different bullet points I just, like,
Right.
rambled
Okay.
into.
I'm going to first get to the first one where you were like, oh, I'm doing this like small things. I don't have much. Knowing you and knowing your projects, like even your small projects are with like big names, big companies and stuff, right? So I do want to acknowledge that where you're like, oh, I'm just doing like small things. Like
They're
you're
still
still
kinda small. They're both little startups that are trying to
no,
do.
I know some of the other ones too. So
Mhm.
yes, that we want more work and all of that, but like you're still like people with like credit and all of that are investing on you.
Thank you.
Not enough.
Yeah.
Like none of these small projects is not enough. But I think that goes a little bit to the part where we're like our own haters. Where we're like, oh no, like it's nothing, it's nothing. It's like no, even in your downtime, right? Like you're still have
Okay.
capability to do things that are not that startups are like they're great and I'm very happy for them and I think like that's what we want to do like we hope to like be able to like maybe at some point like have our own startup so it's like that's aspirational that aside when you told me you're doing that the other day and I was like oh yeah like maybe some of it is just practice like I know when you do that just so many times, it's so much easier to just turn on your camera, look at it, and say something that comes to mind. And I was wondering, like, do I just do that? Do I start talking about things? And yeah, like you see other people where you're like, it's effortless, but it's not. And then in the morning, I had like just like something come to mind, and it was again like sad Ray, emo Ray, but like with a twist of hope or whatever. And I talked about it on like an Instagram story and then I got like a lot of messages and I had like friends checking in on me and like one of the friends was like do you want to do like a video call and I called her Gunjun shout out you're the best
Yes.
talked to like our like the new friends that were there which is like an organization that we're all with and then a part of me felt very guilty because I was like oh my god like I'm not doing horrible.
Am I baiting people for, like, pity?
Yes, yes. I was like, am I pity baiting? Because like I'm okay, right? Like
Mhm.
I'm sad, I'm grieving, I'm like worried about the future, but like I'm okay. Um, and once like the attention came in, I just like had this like feeling of, oh no, do they feel like it, I'm like in a situation where something like dramatic is happening, and at the same time, what if I feel this again and I want to post about it, and then people start perceiving me as this person that is always like whining?
Mm.
Like, what if it
Mhm.
becomes my personality? And
Mhm.
then I'm like, but that's not how I feel about other people who keep talking about their vulnerabilities. Like, I don't think they're whiners. I'm just like, man, like life is rough. And I appreciate them sharing it because every time I hear something along those lines, I'm like I can relate to some of that at some point. It makes you feel less isolated. But when it's me, then I'm like, oh, am I being whiny?
No, but that was something like when I was telling my sister about this idea, like one of her first reactions was just like, "Well, how are your future employers like are they going to perceive you as like, oh, this person is being like too authentic or too like, like if I'm saying that I got another rejection for this thing that
Mhm.
I applied for, like does that make me look as like a negative person that's like not capable?" And even when I was documenting during grad school when I was like I failed my qualifying exam and just kind of like not wallowing, but I was in the thick of it. And so a lot of my posts were just like very like, like like dread, like being just too real to the point that even my partner was just like, why are you always crying on the internet? Like, am I just like fake, I'm like it just like, like sad baiting people into just like pitying me. But you're in the middle of it and it's just like it's all consuming sometimes. And so the
Yeah.
fact that like we need work to survive this capitalistic society that we're in or to even do the kind of work and impact that we want to do. So without having a job, we're just kind of like, yeah, like what like we're just floating in this like weird lull.
Right.
So it's just ever consuming and ever present and always that we're gonna talk about. But I think it's also just a moment,
Mhm.
Like, yes, I'm gonna wallow, but if the goal is that out of this I get a job, then it can turn into more celebration and like what I've learned or whatever.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know. I remember go ahead, go ahead.
No, no, no. Finish your thought, because
No, but it's just like I feel like I'm guilty of that too, of just like posting that I'm sad and then like getting compliment. But sometimes it's like, dude, I work from home. I'm by myself. Some
Mhm.
my only friends are like my internet connections. And so,
Right.
sometimes it's just kind of like a call for like, hey, this is how I'm feeling. I'm inviting
Right.
conversation.
Plus, when you do that, I think other people feel comfortable doing that rather than just, not talk about it and everything. And I appreciate seeing other people talk about misery.
Mhm. Mhm.
Not that you know what I mean. Like I'm not happy about it, but I appreciate the sharing of the loneliness and grief and everything. Um, but one of the things that as like we do science communication training, and one of the things that I appreciate is I have showed probably your video, like Instagram video of like the time when you were in grad school and was very authentic about like how you feel about like failing and all of that. I show it to a lot of the students because and they watch it and then we talk about we're like, how do we feel about Stephanie? And they share, they're like, like she's so authentic. I like her. She was just like so natural. Like I appreciated sharing all of that. Then I kind of like make the point of like we worry about sharing these kind of things or how people's perception changes. But from what I'm hearing, like a lot of you are like, wow, like I can't believe like she's just so open and like you can see it in the way you're talking about it, the authenticity. People are like, oh, I want to be her friend, right?
Mhm.
And I think it's like when you have these kind of examples on social media, on different places of your failure, describing your failure. And there is study that shows, like disclosing failure and all of that kind of actually does help build trust. Disclosing vulnerabilities help build trust. So it's counterintuitive where you feel like if I share all of that, then it will backfire. However, there is a safe zone of vulnerability. And I once for a talk I made this graph. It was like my vulnerability graph where it's kind of like I share a little bit of vulnerability, and the reaction is kind of like a little positive. So you share a little more, and the reaction is like kind of positive, and then you share just a little more, and then you trust the different audiences because you had such good audiences before, and then there's this audience that is very different, and you share your vulnerability, and they take it and they
Mm,
crush you with it,
mm,
and woo, drops down your confidence and like using your vulnerability, right? And then once you're down there, then you have to try it again a little bit, and you're like, oh, you know what, I have to find where is my safe vulnerability zone and who are the audiences, right? So I think it is a fair thing for us to be like, what if someone that doesn't know us, that doesn't know our CVs, our experiences, who we're working with, just hears this conversation and they're like, they sound shit. They
mhm.
sound like they've never had jobs, never got good jobs. No one's
So
like
entitled.
so entitled. And because we talk shit about ourselves, they like there is no like external thing that is like, oh no, we have done good things in our lives. So our vulnerability in that context could be misinterpreted or could be taken. Or if someone is coming in into this conversation who already has a bias against us, let's say like someone that thinks like, I know, we're DI hires or something, they would hear it and be like, oh, motivated reasoning or confirmation bias. They take the evidence that we're giving them, this vulnerability, and instead of like having that goodwill of like building trust and all of that, it would be like, I guess they are bad, right? So, to be fair, there are risks associated with vulnerability, and it's on us to kind of like evaluate the situation, but also maybe be like, if an employee hears that despite seeing my CV and work and everything, and is like, these people are incompetent, probably not the right employer.
Exactly, exactly. Because that's like, why would you yeah, again, like, there's one of my recent interviews that I had. Oh my god, I think I self-sabotaged a little too hard, where they asked me I hate those questions, but they're being asked, I need to get better at them, but they're like, "If you have a conflict or, like, if someone does this, like, how would you handle this, like, conflict?"
Uh huh.
Oh, no, the topic was, like, if someone was late to, like, delivering a deliverable, like, how would you address it as, like, the manager? And I went like, "Well, I don't remember, but I felt like I believe I don't remember my memory." But it was kind of like, I hope that we're all human, we're gonna drop the ball. There's gonna be a point where hopefully I can, like, help them, but at the end of the day, like, we just need to touch grass, you know? Like, it's not like, it's not the end of the world. Like, all of these deadlines are, like, self-imposed. I was just like, we're like, it's not like we're gonna be okay. It's not that big of a deal. But I remember I was like, I don't know if it's just like the existential part of me saying this, but I'm like, this is probably such a bad answer. I literally told him like, this is such a bad answer, and it was just like, oh, like why did they just do that? And I remember telling my husband of like me saying this, he's like, why would you tell them that that's a bad answer? Like, you just like, even if it is a bad answer, like, you have to, like, just stick it out and just say that, like, just sit in it, like, 10 toes down, like, I said that, but for me to be like, "Oh, I think that was a really bad answer." But, like, I was met with also humility, but then after that interview, like, the person that was interviewing me was like, "You'd be surprised that we kinda have, like, the same mentality here, like, it's not that bad." Like, they're very reassuring, like, they were very kind people,
Right.
but also, like, that's so self-sabotaging for me to be like, "I don't know, is that a bad answer? That's such a bad answer, I'm so sorry."
Also, like a good noodle wants to ask, like, what is your biggest weakness? You're like, I'm very honest.
Yeah, yeah, I'm an
Bro,
honest to a fault, like, I'm maybe too vulnerable in these situations, I'm being too honest, I need to, like, reel it back in.
I think if we ever have like merch or something, Steph, like sometimes just have to go touch grass should definitely be one.
Yeah, yeah, go
Where we
touch grass.
go touch grass. We'll make t-shirts of it and go
Oh my goodness, but yeah, I feel like, yeah, there is risk in self-sabotaging, but I guess, like, how do we find I'm curious in, like, that paper that you said that, like, what was that point that was too much vulnerability? Like, is it something
Oh, that was a made up graph I did
okay, okay.
for a talk.
Mhm, mhm.
But I wonder if anyone has studied like social interpersonal vulnerability and risk And when does it like enter the realm of, yeah, negative perception? Do you have stuff for me to react to, or do I have stuff for you to react to too?
Segue into, yeah, you.
So as a part of a Nat Geo grant that I had, we are connecting, as you know, science communication researchers like yourself with science communication practitioners, also like yourself, who are National Geographic Explorers. And the rationale behind this is, a lot of people who do science communication practice, filmmaking, storytelling, all of that, they want to learn more about like social sciences, psychology, latest research, and all of that. They don't have access to social scientists. Like, it's hard to find them. They try to like read the papers, and sometimes the papers are like written in ways that are not super functional and applicable. So, a part of this project is like, first of all, just get people to meet, get people to know each other. Maybe like in 5 years, someone wants to collaborate with a researcher and they're like, oh, I actually do know someone. And some of it is just like for the researchers to bring some of their work out of academia, but also learn from what practitioners are doing and how they can make some of that research practical. So, one of the first sessions that we did online with SciComm Lab was on the science of storytelling. And we brought in Dr. Nathan Fielder, who is not our Nathan Walter from Northwestern University, who teaches storytelling. And one of the things that he shared is his top three best practices, kind of like principles in storytelling. I'm gonna give you like a abridged version of some of that and have you react, and we can talk about what it means in practice. Okay, so he shares these principles that he has on storytelling. And abridged version, principle number one is recall. So we talk about strategizing. When you want to tell a story that has impact, you have to decide what is the thing I want my audience to remember, to take with them. Let's say that thing that you want to remember is shoe. Okay, I'm like, I want my audience to remember shoe. The principle is that that thing that audience should remember should be a part of a cause or an effect in that story. So it can be Steph comes in and she's wearing shoes. Look at these cool shoes. And then story happens and then someone shoots you. It's me, you die. I decided, oh my God, this was horrible. And the shoe is there. So I might not remember the shoe. But what if it's a shoe that has a gun? So the shoe is the cause of your death, right? In that case, I will remember the shoe, right? Or what if like I shoot you with a gun and you turn into a shoe?
Mhm.
So that's the effect.
I blocked the bullet with a shoe.
What is exactly? So it's like the cause of you being alive. So that's principle number one, which is interesting because I don't think I've thought about it that way. I usually think about like, oh, who is the person? What is the story they're telling? It has never been, is the subject a cause or an effect, an impact
Hmm.
of the narrative?
I don't think I've ever applied that, but it does make sense. So during graduate school, one of the classes I got to take was a script writing class. And yeah, like the recall was one of them. It's like, and then also like the rule of threes, like the rule of like a beginning, middle, and end. But like you introduce something in the beginning and then at the end, it's like seeing a lot in comedy. Like you mentioned a funny joke and then like the punchline happens again at the
Right.
very end. So I feel like that plays into that recall. But I don't think I've ever seen it in um done in SciComm, but I think that's a clever thing.
Right, right, right. Is it the if there's a gun at the beginning of the play, it has to like
Yeah,
go
like
off.
are we foreshadowing, like I whenever there's tricks that are seen in like movies of like I don't know if it's sometimes too obvious or not obvious, but sometimes you see something in a movie and you're like, "Oh, this is definitely foreshadowing something." Like, okay, like they somehow slowly panned to the gun
Mhm.
very, like but it wasn't talked about in the conversation like, okay, like what is this gun is going to have a played actor in the
Right,
past. And
right.
so I wonder what like would be a good example of that in terms of like science communication because I feel like it's maybe easier when we're like at a location where like the
Mhm.
location is like the main character of like, okay, we're trying to understand like the science of geysers.
Mm.
But if there's a smaller player in that in terms of um the microbiome, like the microbes or like, like the I forget what they're called, like the xenophile, like those microbes that like live in like very harsh, like
Oh,
like
Like tardigrades, not
Yeah,
the
yeah.
microbes as tardigrade, but like the
Yeah.
things like like tardigrades that are
Yeah,
very.
but they survive in, like, these hot geothermal things,
Mm.
and, um, and making them, like, the main, like, character of just, like, okay, like, we know about it, but then if the bigger picture is the landscape, but then the cause of, like, having these beautiful geysers or whatever is because of these microbes, I mean, like, maybe that's a good recall, but I feel like that I feel like a lot of these practices that we see in terms of, like, what Hollywood does in storytelling, what, like, comedians do in, like, their comedy bits can be kind of, like, dissected down, and how do we translate that and adapt that to SciComm? Because right now, I feel like what's really frustrating about science communication is that we have, like, the typical documentary stuff that we see of just, like, we're following the scientists in the car, and now we're driving to this new location, and they have, like, a little, it's a beautiful view of, like, wherever they're going, and then they're talking about their science. Or it's like the science explainer that we see on YouTube of just, like, the talking head with the green screen. So it's like, how do we experiment with different types of formats to if we're trying to make science to be just as educational and entertaining as stuff in Hollywood, like, how do we practice and adapt more of these, like, Hollywood
Right.
style, principles into it? So I feel like recall is an interesting one. I wonder how we can experiment with that.
I mean, in a way, like if you think of Jurassic Park, we were all obsessed with dinosaurs who were literally the cause of everything that happened, right?
Mhm,
Um, you look at a lot of disaster movies, Twister, Tornado, they are the cause of the disaster, right?
mhm,
Um, and I wonder sometimes, like when we are producing things, even if we, like, let's say I can tell the story of like, here's an insect, the insect is this and this and this and this, versus the story of I am Stephanie, and I decided to become an entomologist, which you are not, but pretend. And the cause of you being so in love with nature and what you do is this tiny little insect that you saw when you were a kid. And it kind of reminded you of this, and that happened, and that happened, and that happened. And eventually you became this. So it's not just like Stephanie is talking about this insect, right? Because then I'm like, well, it's an insect. But this insect is the cause of you being who you are, or
mhm,
it changed your life in some way, or it's like how you remember a family member, a memory. So how do you make them an integral part of the story? Or a disease, right? That like someone might be like, I'm studying this because this disease was the impact, right, that like it had in my life. So like I was this, I did that, and then I got cancer, right? There are people that like live in different places, situations, and then they decide to like go work on environmental causes because there were such horrible impact. So that might be something where you're like, oh, like I want to learn more about what this cancer, specific type of cancer is, and the cause of it, right?
mhm,
So
mhm,
how do we put a lot of these topics into, this is the thing that changed me, this is the thing that changed who I am, changed my life, or the life of something or a situation, and here's, or it's, I'm talking about the impact.
mhm, mhm, mhm. Yeah, and then the cause. Yeah, I think that's a good, like, cause and effect. I wonder where, like, the recall then in those examples is the recall.
You just remember it better.
Hmm.
You recall it better because you're like, it's not just the insect is not just something that was a part of like the movie scenes were on. It was like, no, no, no. The insect was the cause of why Stephanie
Um,
became that. So the next time I see you and I'm like, hey, I like every time I see that insect, like I think of you.
yeah, yeah. No, okay, that makes sense. Because I was thinking of recall in terms of, like, at the end okay, so say, this we're, like, this doing this documentary about me with this insect.
Right.
And, the insect is what, like, sparked all this inspiration, and I can, like, see at the very end of the scene, there's, like, a framed picture of
Right.
this, like, bug that, like, is
Right.
either, like, seen, like, on the like, over my shoulder or, like, is zoomed in as,
Right.
like, I'm, like, finishing the story. I feel like that's also, like, a way to do
It
it.
is. That's number one. And actually, so that's kind of close to number two. I'm going to use this as a segue. So, number two is fluency, right? So, if I show you two by two, it's like four, right? But if I show you like 385 times 552, you're like, oh,
Yeah.
right? So, the fluency of information, right, kind of like makes it easier to have an impact and remember it and all of that. And I think some of that goes to like when you use a lot of jargon. I'm
Mhm.
just spacing out. I'm like not there. I'm not listening to your story and all of that. But when I can follow your story, right? That's one thing. And the thing that like he mentioned is repetition, right? Like we know when you repeat something kind of becomes like more impactful. Like that's the same thing with like misinformation. The more like you repeat something, the more it becomes believable. So I guess some of that is like the insect, you're seeing it and you talk about it. And at the end, there's like, the picture of the insect. So you keep seeing this insect, you keep repeating that.
Right.
Um, the example that actually Nathan used was from Friends, where Jennifer Aniston becomes pregnant, and they're like, "Oh, like, but we use condoms. Aren't they like effective?" And Ross is like I thought we use this, so we should be fine. And she's like, "No, there's like 97% like efficacy, and like they're 97% of the time effective." And they keep repeating that number like in different places, and there's another scene where they keep repeating it, and apparently that was like a collaboration for like
Mm.
health and stuff so that people learn that it's 97%. So by the end of the time we watch these clips and stuff, like I will remember 97% forever because it
Mhm.
was a part of a narrative, but it kept being repeated. And when you think about it, it's the cause of her having a kid, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So that goes into that fluency. It's easier to hear it and everything, but also like you keep repeating it.
That's really interesting because it makes sense in that sense. When we want people, it feels more achievable or more of a strategy when people are wanting to do like more of these impact or PSA campaigns. But what's interesting to hear you say that is that, okay, so for example, some of these YouTubers that I like will try to write for, one of them told me was like, we want people to finish watching our video as if they just like finished reading a chapter of a textbook. So they just want to like have like a 15 to like 30-minute YouTube video explainer with like all of this information.
Right.
And so it's just like hearing that it helps with like repetition. We want something to like anchor the story of like, okay, what is the main question that we're answering? But there's, like, so many, like, subtopics that sometimes it's just like, is this too much? But I
Mm,
don't know, I feel like that's just, like yeah, I don't know, that's, like, where my mind goes at first.
right. Would you think that that depends like on, so like that's something I don't know the research for, but if you have that chapter where you're like, I just want people to use this as a review, where they
Mhm.
get to like watch a video that reviews all the chapter. So maybe it's, to me it sounds that might be less of a, something useful for someone that's hearing this for the first time or learning about it, but someone that knows this and knows it well and is going to an exam room but just needs like one last review of things, that doesn't have the time to read the book.
So working in the online space, people are always or producers or companies are always looking into evergreen content or what is the curiosity gap that we're trying to answer. So,
Mm,
like, if people are Googling, like, "Why don't flies get drown with raindrops?" you know? But then, with some friends and writers that work in this space, one friend in particular who's, like, super great at writing was talking about how, like, okay, we're presenting stories in terms of, like, a mystery. Like, we have this one overarching mystery, which is, like, "Why don't flies do this?" But
mhm.
in learning the big overarching mystery, we're solving all these little mysteries, which are, like, answering different types of questions. So, I guess if we're using fluency, though, maybe the fluency there is the way it's presented maybe linearly or, like, solving a murder mystery kind of linear type of storytelling.
Right.
Um, is the repetition because that we're having, like, this main character, which is the insect, and, like, the physics or the science of the insects going through it. So I wonder if it makes sense in that way, but when you look at it, when you step back, it's still a 30-minute
Right.
YouTube video going down so many paths into the science of, like, the physics of this, the science of that, the science history of this. Because it's like there are many documentaries, and so it's just like, okay, so if we're wanting to create a story that's that big, then how do the storytellers know what the objective or what is that recall that they want the people to leave with?
Right.
Is it just like yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. So, okay, so a bunch of things come to mind. I think there's something about like there is a big mystery and you teach people things in the process, and sometimes it could get very complicated, right? And
Mhm.
that would remind me of like sometimes you have movies that they start introducing all these different things and you're curious because now you're invested in it. But they keep explaining things and really actually opening it up and have like really nice, like clean flashbacks, and you're like, oh, I'm seeing what's happening, right?
Mhm.
And then you have stuff like what is the guy who did like Shutter Island and like
Oh, yeah.
what's the guy with like all the DiCaprio stuff and
Martin Scorsese, maybe? I don't know
yes.
what director.
Oh my god, look it up.
Okay, let me look it
I'm
up.
not
Uh,
the Inception guy. Oh my god, how did I forget this? The listeners are like idiots.
Christopher Nolan.
Christopher Nolan, right, right, right. Where like at the end of it, you're like, wait, what? Like Shutter Island, I think I fell asleep or something. Um,
Oh, no, Martin Scorsese did direct Shutter Island.
oh really?
Yeah.
Oh, so they didn't do the same thing. Okay, wow.
No. Christopher Nolan was Inception.
Inception
Shutter
and
Island was Martin Scorsese.
right. Okay, got it, got it. I fell asleep in the middle of that. I was like very confused. But some of these things, the repetition is you have to watch it like a second time
Mm.
or even a third time.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Right, right, right.
Mhm.
And it has its own audience. Like I liked Inception, right? It has its own audience too. Some people are like, "Oh no, I like the process of that cognitive engagement and like figuring things out, and every time I'm watching it, I'm learning something new or I'm
Or like
seeing something."
Severance recently. Did you watch Severance?
I I watched the
Oh my
first
god.
episodes, and then we had like in the old house that we had, like, it was like a mouse situation, and every time we would watch that in the evening, a mouse would show up.
Oh my
Like
goodness.
episode 4, I stopped. I'm just like associated with a mouse.
No, it was so good, but anyways, keep going, keep going, keep going.
Yeah, yeah, but yeah, I'll watch it. I'll watch it. But so I think there is something about like once you solve the mystery, there are ways to be like, so this is what happened. Remember all of that? It was this. So when you have probably even like science communication content where you're introducing mysteries, which gets people curious because people have been looking this up, they're like, oh my god, yes, I'm gonna keep watching because there are mysteries that are getting resolved.
Mhm.
If it's too complicated and if that loop is not properly knotted at the end, I think that becomes when you start seeing people dropping halfway through or like even finishing and be like, I feel like I was just like spend like an hour learning nothing. So like maybe they will not come back. Maybe it's a good clickbait. So how do you introduce the complexity but through repetition of explanation you're like, you remember you heard that? It's this. So it's this, okay? You get it? Like and at the end, they were like, so this is what happened. Just to recap. So there are ways to, I think, introduce that repetition into that.
I've heard in some advice okay, I've heard some advice of just, like, we don't want our audience to perceive them as, like, stupid or
Mhm.
incompetent. So,
Right.
like, there's recalling and being so direct about the recall, like, assume that the audience isn't aware of that, but sometimes there's other things where it's just, like, sometimes things have to be completely laid out and made connected to. So I wonder what the balance is of, like, letting our like, I think this was something that I heard because of not Inception, because of watching, like, the behind the scenes for Severance
Hmm.
of, like, some of these mysteries people really dove into and try to figure it out, but they're like, "Okay, our audience is smart. They can figure it out themselves without us explicitly saying this caused this."
Right.
I wonder if we can't play into that because of the risk of misinterpretation,
Mhm.
miscommunication, misinformation when it comes to science, that we have to be more explicit of just like, because this insect did this, even though the solve this mystery is because of this thing, like we said that we introduced at the beginning of the intro of our video.
I think that's a really good point. Because on one hand, yeah, like you want people to be cognitively engaged and guess and all of that. And maybe it is that somewhere through the past process they have the opportunity to try to solve it, and at the end you have like, and this is what it was. If you guessed it, like good, not like exactly like that, but if you guessed it, great, but here's what we have. And I would say, so when you look at like data visualization, sometimes the general thing that we always say is that it should be as clear as possible. You look at a data visualization, you should say that's what it says, that's what it means. However, this is true if your goal is for people to look at a graph, learn something from it, and take it with them. What if you want people to be curious? What if like your objective is for people to be curious and ask questions and spend more time with the content, look around, figure it out, be like really mentally engaged with it? In that case, your visualization might, it probably has to be a little difficult, right? Which is literally called like visual difficulty, where you look at something and you're like, I think I know what this is, but I'm not really sure, right? And when I was doing my dissertation, what is very interesting is if you're in a space, let's say this place at Adler Planetarium is called the Space Visualization Lab. People go in, there's like this giant picture of something that looks like a galaxy, but it's not. It's like weird. So people would sit there, and you always have a scientist there. And people are like, what is this? And the scientists are like, what do you think this is? And then you have a conversation going on, and like they're engaged, they're curious, they're asking questions, but you also have like literally the scientist there to make sure you're not misinterpreting it, not taking the wrong like idea, all of that kind of stuff. So maybe at the end of the day, it's, is your topic dangerous? Like, are they, I think you're 100% right. Like, what is the risk associated with not exactly understanding what I'm trying to say? Then I introduce something to you that cause probably more harm. So, what are the risks, and how much do I need you to know exactly what I'm trying to say? How facilitated it is, like, is someone there present to be able to be like, what do you like, parents, right? Like,
Mhm.
that's one of the themes that keeps coming up, that is like, are you watching YouTube videos with your kids? Like, the best way to consume content is if you're there present with them and you can have conversations. So as a parent, can you be like, oh, what do you think the answer is? Like, this is actually this. um and if it's not human outside facilitated, like a scientist or something, can the content cause that curiosity and everything, but towards the end have like a very like structured, like, this is what you need to know, or like check the description for the final answer, or like there's a graph here that you can see that explains things. That's why like when you're even watching like content, you're creating content, you're like, oh, you're narrating the story, but do you have like a visual map so that every once in a while audiences can look at, be like, here's what we just said, or like, this is how it looks.
Mhm, 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 mhm. What's the third point?
Okay. The third is, so it was interesting because I had like some questions and I learned new words.
Yeah.
Framing, right?
Yes.
How do you frame the story? And framing goes like a billion ways, right? So you might say you want to talk about like a problem that exists in the society. You can make it, you can frame it as something very personal, right? So Stephanie has like a pencil problem. Like, let's say this is a social issue, like people love pencils too much. And then as filmmakers, a lot of times we're like, we should show like personal stories, right? So the framing is, Stephanie has like a pencil issue. She's buying too many pencils, and then she's like consuming them, and like she's spent all of her life saving on buying pencils. She's losing friends and family over her love for pencils. Da 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 da. We like telling personal stories.
Mhm.
And then if you start like asking an audience to look at it and be like, so what's the problem? And they're like, the problem is Stephanie. Stephanie needs to get her shit together, right?
Yeah. Stephanie has a pencil addiction, and that's not normal.
Right? So people are not seeing, how is the society letting Stephanie down? Was it that Stephanie like grew up really wanting a pencil, but she couldn't get a pencil because there was no money, because there was no this, because pencils were banned by the government. So then she had this like developed this like pencil addiction, right?
Mhm,
But I'm not seeing this because that's not what the story is framed.
mhm,
Now, if I only tell a story about like the society, like the government has banned pencils, da 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 da, then I'm not emotionally connected to the problem. So the framing, is it personal or is it like systematic, kind of, right?
mhm,
And, and then at least like maybe one of the things we should think about, how do I frame Stephanie's personal story, but add that society part of it so that the audience can see it's emotional and personal, but there's a bigger picture. It's not her fault,
mhm,
right?
mhm,
It's not,
mhm,
it's not just like, well, she needs to get her shit together. It's like the society is not supporting her. So any framing we choose for anything matters. And the two words that I've learned is epistemic framing and thematic framing. So epistemic framing is like the one that is more like personal, and then thematic is more like policy related, and like the society kind of thing. But there's like a billion other framings.
Yeah, I feel like I've seen good examples of that when this is where like documentaries do usually do a good job in that sense of just even bridging the both types of frames. Okay, so like the people example will be any of like those crime scene types of documentaries where it's just like, I didn't know that the husband was going to kill somebody and you're just looking at the story and the play by play. But with other like more science-based documentaries look in terms of like thematic, like I've been recently subbed to a channel on YouTube called The Perfect Union, and it's very much more like journalistic, like independent journalism type of YouTube. Like think of no, is he's not like who's the guy that I watch like Johnny Harris? Do you follow Johnny Harris?
I don't think so.
Okay, well anyways. But okay, so it's more of like investigative reporting. And so at the same time that Veritasium released his PFAS video,
Mhm.
maybe like a couple weeks later, this YouTube channel called The Perfect Union also released a story about PFAS. But they were more the bigger picture was how like even both in Veritasium and this other YouTube channel, the bigger picture was like, okay, there was no regulation for this company that invented this new molecule. Were introduced to the expert, not the expert, but the lawyer who was on the case that sued this bigger company to like look into like do the investigation to see like what they're hiding. And then you go down another layer of like these were the farmers or the people that were affected.
Right.
Veritasium goes a different route in terms of he's explaining the science of like why this molecule was like indestructible. And then he like tested his own blood of like, okay, am I susceptible to this? Where the more Perfect Union YouTube channel, because they were more like investigative journalism, they talked to like farmers that are still impacted by it today and how it's like messing with like their income, like how they're like the having to throw away or kill their own cattle or all the meat that they produce. And so you have the people aspect of it, but you still see the bigger cause, which is like the bigger picture of like
Mhm.
not government, but like big corporations with no regulations
Right.
kind
Right.
of thing. So it still has that people element in it, but I guess just framed differently. I guess they're both framed differently.
Yeah. But I do think that's a good example of like, yeah, how do you keep it like personal, whether it's like for Veritasium, like he was the personal where he's like, I thought I'm not gonna have like I'm gonna be normal, but I had like way more of that
Yeah.
like in my blood, which is like
Yeah, because he
crazy.
could have kept it more separated in terms of, like, moments where sometimes stats don't always work of, like, one like, he did present stats in terms of, like, okay, like, 1 in every 2 people have, like, PFAS in their blood, and this is, like, the percentage level. But I think what helped connect it even more is that he put himself in that stat and tested it himself, so then it kinda
Mhm.
adds to more of, like, oh shit, like this is not like this is a serious thing that
Right.
like he's also affected instead of just it being like this is the stat and that's it. Like sometimes
Right.
presenting facts as fact doesn't really like do anything.
Mhm.
And then what I guess the perfect union does is that like they have multiple people that are being impacted that you're getting the first person story of just like okay, the people that are living close to these facilities, the farmers that are being affected by it, the other grassroots efforts, moms that are like trying to get, that are having a grassroots effort to try to like, get more regulations so their kids and their water are protected. So like there's more characters in that sense for people to see themselves.
Right.
But I
Right.
feel like they still have an impact of just like, okay, the big theme is that the theme for both of them is that there's a corporation that had no regulation or oversight that led to all these ripple effects into everything else.
Right. If
Yeah.
anyone ever said, "Why do you guys keep talking about the same things again and again?" and we're like, "Fluency."
That yeah, and I think that is very yeah, because usually I've been trying not to watch as many like Veritasium videos. No hate to Veritasium.
No, no.
I'm keeping that in there just for for shits and gigs. but for those that are just listening, guys, just a little hate. But because sometimes I think it's like, he falls in my hater radar of just like this person is really good at what he does.
Yeah.
And so I find myself hating him from like how good it is.
Yes.
So I'm just like, oh, I can't write something like this.
Right.
But I think also Veritasium does a good job at not towing the line, but like sometimes that are we only see as talking points on the
Mm-hmm.
right, and then the left immediately shuts it down when there is still some validity to their concern. So like,
I don't get it.
okay,
Say.
so an example of this, I recently watched the first episode of the second season for A Day's Edge's Human Footprint.
Right.
Um, and I was watching it to hate. To hate. But then I was like,
I
"Oh,
think
wait."
too because it's great and we love it. Again, like I think at this point our listeners know when
Yeah.
we say to hate
We
is like
we hate because we're just envious for how good they are.
yes, yes.
But sometimes it's just like, okay, sometimes it can be like, the cinematography is beautiful, blah, 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 blah. But the first season was more focused on kind of like more animals, more conservation. But
Mm,
this episode was more people centered. Was
right.
of like, hey, like the commercialization of the grocery store was the first episode of this.
Mhm.
So down the rabbit holes that I fall on social media is like, we see like we have make America healthy again.
Mhm.
There people are wanting to going back to like to growing their own food and like, everything has chemicals in it. We don't want anything to be processed.
Right.
So for Dage Edge, a company that's very science forward, to kind
Mhm.
of have a conversation about the over commercialization of food
Right.
and then go down the weeds of like, hey, at the cost of having something conveniently presented at the grocery store,
Mhm.
the trade-off or the cost is that there's human exploitation in
Right.
different countries.
Right.
There's what like this apple that we think is fresh has been dried in a big factory farm for over a year before it's delivered onto your thing, or the amount of marketing that goes into getting you to buy this certain cereal. Like
Right.
these are topics that usually we find the right more hyper fixating on, and then but we have a more science forward channel kind of addressing it, or like not addressing it, but at least like tackling one aspect or issue of it. I don't
Right.
know. What are you gonna say?
Or we yeah, call it like I don't know like necessarily like some of it is right, some of it is like the health.
Yeah, like we have like okay, like we have the big arguments between like big pharma and now we have big wellness.
Right,
You
exactly.
know?
Right,
Like
right.
like it's the main issue is
Mhm.
that that sometimes that like gets lost into the weeds
Right.
is consumerism, capitalism, corporate
Right, right,
exploitation,
right. Right. Because
whatever.
big wellness is now making a lot of money.
Yeah, exactly. Big Wells is making just as much and sometimes more dangerous claims
Mhm.
that, there are like like maybe pharmaceutical drugs isn't always the answer for all of our treatments. It is eating healthy, but like why don't we have access to food and nutrients is because of like these other systemic things that are underlying it.
Mhm.
So the
Right.
fact that like Days Edge was able to kind of look deeper into the systems at play
Right. Right.
and to produce a show that's very science forward,
Mhm.
knowing that's gonna be on PBS for a more boomer audience who are maybe more right-leaning or,
Right.
like, more into, like, the caring about their health and wellness, but maybe shying away from, like, the science of it to, like, produce a show or
Mhm.
produce an episode that kind of, like, talks about this at a big bird's eye kind of view.
Right. And I think a big part of that comes and this is probably gonna be our wrap up.
Yeah.
A big part of that is when we talk about like we want to complicate the narratives about all
Mhm.
of these topics. Like I remember I talked to one of the producer, Paige Buono, who was talking about like she's like reading a billion books, right? To just like hear the different ways the problem has been described and addressed and all of that. And I'm like, you get to tell a very complicated story like that because you're reading so much about it from different point of views and different sides and different histories. From like, it's not just science, it's culture, as you said, it's marketing, it's all of that kind of stuff. And once you do that, I think anyone that watches that could be like, I believe science is good for you and pharma has its place. I also believe healthy food is good. Like, different people with different opinions can probably, I hope, see that and be like, oh, yeah, like it is talking about some of my concerns in all these different fields because it was written considering all the different concerns.
Yeah, yeah. It wasn't perfect. The show wasn't perfect because the ending was like one way, like I feel like sometimes it was just like showing too much. Like, you know how we have this with like climate, with like sometimes we show too much of like the effect, the cause and effect, that it becomes like overwhelming of just like, what can we do? You know,
Mm,
what can we do? And so for like they presented one solution, but the one solution was just kind of like, okay.
right.
And so yeah, I wonder what like helps with like making sure when we're having these recalls or having these themes or episodic, whatever, you know, like the two terms you said. And then what was the other one? The
Fluency, framing, and recall.
Yeah, fluency, framing, recall. So it's just like making sure what is the main call to action that you wanted people to leave with. So like
Mhm.
after watching that, like
Right.
being explicitly clear from the beginning. So you're making sure that like you're having all of these anchor points or these tactics and storytelling, but then we're not getting lost in the sauce. And actually people
Right.
are walking away with like, this is the one fact that people should
Mhm.
walk away with after this video.
Right.
Um,
Unless, right, your goal or your objective with an episode is, I want people's takeaway be to want to read more about this. Like, it might not, it might may like maybe the action you want them to take is the action of reading more or becoming more curious to go look up something else or click on a link that says more. So depending on that, yeah. And to be fair, like like what is a perfect ending, right?
yeah,
Except
for
for
sure.
Lord of the Rings that has a perfect ending, but
I didn't watch it.
what?
I didn't watch
I
it.
mean, what?
No, no. And on that note,
Oh, no more podcast
this is
review.
the end of our friendship. No, just kidding.
Bye.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Ray, for another lovely conversation. Thank you for our 5 friends for listening. Shout out to Alex for actually being that one friend who does listen.
Yeah, Evelyn
Um,
too, I feel like I've seen her. We're like, these are like fake Patreons, you know? People like name their Patreon.
yeah.
Like, Patreons like Evelyn, Alex are friends that would lie.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
yes, I listen to
Uh,
everything all the time. Like,
yeah, shout out to my dad who does listen to these.
right, right, right.
But yeah, send your drama, send even though there's not really a lot of drama, but yeah, send us stuff to hate. Send us some stuff to hate on. SciCommHotline.com or drama at SciCommHotline.com. All right, Ray, until next time.
Bye.
Bye.